Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Abhishek Chaudhary from CICDT department. A very warm welcome to all the participants and speakers to the third edition of DX Summit, organized by Confederation of Indian Industry and Center for Digital Transformation. I welcome the distinguished speaker of the session on enabling innovation, efficiency, and sustainability of the infrastructure sector. Before we begin, I would like to request all the speakers to keep their mics on mute and unmute while speaking. I also request the speakers to keep the video on when they are speaking or presenting and adhere to the time of 7 to 8 minutes. The session will be moderated by Mr. Ankur Malhotra, Director Corporate Affairs and CSR for HP India. The other esteemed speaker of the sessions are Mr. Bharat Joshi, Chair CI Committee on Railway Transport and Director, Associated Container Terminals Limited, Mr. Prab Paul, Partner Trace Coast Canada, Mr. Satish Kamath, President Sri City, Mr. Mukul Kumar, Vice President Sustainability Initiatives, Tata Communications, and Mr. Alok Bilal, Director Partner Development and Sustainability Lead, Microsoft India. The program is being run on CI Hive platform as well, where we have around 4,000 participants register for the DX Summit. I request participants to keep type their questions in Q&A section on CI Hive, and we will take them at the end of the session. With this, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Ankur Malhotra. Ankur is Director Corporate Affairs and CSR for HP India and focuses on engagement strategies to support their growth of business and to enhance company's brand. He also represents HP at government and non-government forums on public policy matters impacting the company. Having done his graduation in economics and political science and post-graduation in business administration, Ankur has more than 21 years of experience with C-suite companies like Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, and Wipro. With this, I would like to invite and hand over the control to Mr. Ankur Malhotra to take up the session. Over to you, Ankur.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm audible as well as visible.
Yes, you are.
If one of you can give a thumbs up. Thanks, Prab. So today, I think, as mentioned, we are here to discuss a very important agenda with regards to how we can enable innovation, efficiency, and sustainability in infrastructure sector. I really don't have to give you any background with regards to why infrastructure sector is such a critical sector for just not India, but for the world, because as per UN Sustainable Goal website, 14.2% or close to 15% of our workforce is directly engaged in the manufacturing and allied sectors, which kind of is what we're talking about is the whole impact it makes on the global economy and the global humanity is immense. Especially in India, if you look at it, last 10 odd years, the scope of infrastructure development has really gone through the roof, if I may say so. We have really done wonders, and I think with projects like National Infrastructure Pipeline and other projects which are now on the anvil, we are really looking at infrastructure expansion to the hilt. Let me just give you a very small example of how, for traditionally a non-infrastructure IT company such as Hewlett Packard Enterprise, development of infrastructure in India makes a huge difference. Some 2 months back, we were doing analysis of India as a destination for HPE with regards to our R&D, with regards to our facility expansion, with regards to what it can offer and service to the neighboring geographies. So we picked up a data point from 2016-17, and we picked up the data point from 2020-21. And let me be very candid, the most attractive data point beside the digital transaction was the pace at which the infrastructure has gone up across the country. That was one thing which we really were proud to present to our global folks and tell them that the India 5 years back and India today, there is a market difference in it. However, as we go along, it becomes extremely important to, achieve sustainability or look at the long-term implication of this vast infrastructure, development in the country. And as per me, sustainability and innovation go hand in hand, because, until you innovate, you can't have sustainability, because it would lead to, frankly speaking, cost overruns. It would lead to mismanagement of resources. It might even lead to, a recalculation of all the margins and all the bottom and top lines which companies are doing. So, uh, in my sense, innovation is a requisite for sustainability to happen in the infrastructure sector. So, I'll just not spend too much time on a background, and I'll move to Mr. Bharat Joshi from Associated Container Terminal. Uh, Mr. Bharat, my first question to you, and as stated earlier, you'll have 7 to 8 minutes to answer this question, and subsequently, if I get time, I'll ask you a follow-up question, and then finally we'll open it up for audience questions. So, Mr. Bharat, the first question which I have is that uh, can you please broadly share your views on the Prime Minister Gati Shakti program, especially with regards to what does it mean for infrastructure development and what does it mean with regards to digital transformation?
Thank you so much, Mr. Malhotra, and you've made my job a lot easier by setting the context so well. Um, so before I launch into the program per se, I think our panel is an extremely pertinent and a timely one because it deals with, of course, infrastructure, but also connects uh, words like innovation or digitalization or sustainability, which may or may not have been very naturally associated with infrastructure in the not so distant past. And there, of course, have been, many longer term wheels that have been turning and also some more immediate factors at play. And by the more immediate, I refer to, of course, the pandemic, which brought the focus on resilience and sustainability front and center. So supply chains and infrastructure before that was uh, mostly talked about in terms of leniency and how lean you are. But now, in addition to leniency, there's also resiliency or resilience. So that is one. The second is how does one continue to have viable infrastructure which can deliver under an emergency such as a pandemic? And I think the short answer to that is there is no other way around it than to leverage technology. And if you're doing that, not only are you sustainable, but also, of course, then digital and, of course, more efficient in other ways, including cost efficiency. Um, just a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, actually, in her budget speech, the finance minister, of course, laid out a very clear and a clearly articulated plan towards infrastructure funding, and it went up, quite significantly from 5.5 lakh crore to 7.5 lakh crore. This is an over 35% jump. And it was actually in some ways after the launch, but during the budget, where the Gati Shakti, the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti plan was articulated even more clearly as how it would address the building of crucial infrastructure like roads, ports, railways, logistics, and so much more. And in addition to the investment in the funding plan, and in addition to this, mega program, the PM Gati Shakti, there's also a lot of reforms with and without Gati Shakti, which will further give impetus to the movement of goods and services, and of course also then build up. And you mentioned yourself, Mr. Moderator, the NIP or the National Infrastructure Pipeline. So these are absolutely huge. And if I might draw your attention to the WES recent paper on infrastructure 4.0, that also states that forward-looking infrastructure leverages tech and information to provide high-quality environmental, economic, and social outcomes and functions as a system within the broader human and natural systems. So, in some ways, there is a growing consensus both within India and also globally on not only the kind of infrastructure we require and in the build out of this, but the role that infrastructure must play. And for a very long time, at least in the Indian context, we will require this conversation to become, I think, even more nuanced because we will be very much on the demand side. There's a lot of infrastructure, both highways and highways, that will need to be created. So there's a huge amount of physicality to this, and I think in those ways the Gati Shakti program really cuts across governments, across ministry and verticals, but also across center, states, across the federal structure and so on, and brings them all under the same umbrella. Now, to create this sustainable and resilient infrastructure, we need to harness digitalization, as I mentioned earlier. And to achieve these outcomes, we must rebuild with a purpose using technology as an enabler, which again would be the cornerstone to ensuring that infrastructure can serve as a platform to connect the built environment, the natural world, and also these these data pipelines that can actually serve as a spine for stacks. And we've seen this very famously with the Aadhaar and the India stack that was built around this. So, with the initiatives of the PM Gati Shakti, Smart Cities Mission, Digital India, NHAI, Telecom, and Power, there is, of course, going to be a much greater need and use of data, defining data requirements, gathering it, managing it, and allowing an ecosystem to to thrive around this. And this again relates directly to the India stack, example or precedent that I mentioned. Um, Now, digital somehow then becomes key to all of this. And I realize that on this panel, it's a very diverse and a very senior panel. I'm fortunate to be here, but also as I think the voice of more logistics, because many of you are very much on the tech side of it. So, with that caveat, I just want to mention that digital, I think the way digital has been embraced by our industry, by shipping, logistics, supply chain in the last 2 years has been huge. And this has been a direct result of this tech acceleration. And before 2020, I think the way we would transact shipping transactions would be by and large, identical to how it was done centuries ago, except for maybe the outer trappings of it. But now there's a true and deeper change to it, and this will even go further. So I, of course, have been mentioning Gati Shakti specifically, but also there were other very positive reforms which were mentioned in the finance budget, including crypto and blockchain. Now, blockchain, for instance, can greatly enhance or leverage what currently is being done with infrastructure and in the use of infrastructure. So I'd like to just conclude here by saying that Gati Shakti at the heart of it also not at the heart of it but amongst the many things that it is, it's also a GIS based master plan that would bring infrastructural projects by different ministries from diverse regions and industrial hubs together, integrate them to make India more competitive internationally, and also enhance the Atmanirbhar competitiveness. It would also provide synergy to projects across these regions. And this GIS mapping and dashboard, of course, then leads into a national master plan or a blueprint across our pan-India infrastructural planning. And once this is done, it of course then quite naturally leads to supporting innovation in the startup community and giving rise to a lot of employment and entrepreneurial opportunities across very many sectors of the economy. So I conclude, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure. Mr. Joshi, just a follow-up question on that, and my request would be just to, if you can stick to 2 minutes, because I think then we can move on to. So you very rightly mentioned that Gati Shakti is all about aggregation or consolidation of nation building, if I may say so. Now, based on your experience in this particular area of what you do, uh, can you give me top three examples or top three suggestions for what India can incorporate in terms of sustainability and innovation while it's implementing Gati Shakti? Very quickly, if you can, please.
So top three, okay, I'll try and be brief. So just speaking from personal example, we were very fortunate, our company ACTL, to be part of this flagship bilateral project between India and Japan. And it was G2G, but also a B2B project called the Logistics Data Bank. And this is, of course, under the National Corridors Industrial Development, Corridor, National Industrial Corridor Development Corporation. Finally got it right. And it really does a track and trace of every container pretty much in the country, especially exim, but also domestic. That both creates and then enables the kind of data to be captured, analyzed, and utilized in a way which can um, cause a multiplier effect on the physical infrastructure. So the non-physical soft infrastructure to go around it. I think that's one. The second, as I mentioned already, was I think around blockchain. If we can capture elements of the supply chain, both within borders and across borders, that can unlock a huge amount of value. So, for instance, just think about what we could do with trade finance, or how we could look at doing away with, paper bills of lading. So, why do we have only digital air tickets when we're flying internationally, but we need, paper copies of BLs now? That's another example. And the third, what would the third be? The third, I think, could be perhaps now ESG, of course, is becoming very important. So, how do we address carbon sequestering, both in the build out and then the use of infrastructure? So, I hope I was brief enough. Thanks.
Perfect, Bharat, and that was excellent. So I'll move to Mr. Prab Paul from TraceSoft. And Prab, first of all, let me apologize by saying that I'm going to put you in a spot here. Uh, so let me now give, ideally I should have given some nice figures in the beginning to say how big the infrastructure sector is and how solid it has, added to our economy. So let me give you some other figures. 23% of air pollution is done by the infrastructure sector. 40% of the drinking water pollution is due to the infrastructure sector. 50% of climate change is because of the infrastructure sector. 50% of the landfill waste is due to the infrastructure sector. 40% of your energy use in the world is due to infrastructure sector. My question to you, Prav, and I'm really sorry to putting you in a spot is, uh, you know, you've handled multiple projects across the globe, and probably your organization is handling projects which are, very diverse in nature. So, if you can quickly give me some ideas with regards to how we can have more sustainable and more efficient future where these numbers can probably be looked into, and how probably you're doing it right now. I would imagine that intention is never to actually put you in a spot, but just to put the problem in perspective, that if you can please share some perspective of how we can have these figures improve, how you can improve these figures for us based on your experience with Prab.
Well, absolutely, Ankur. I guess data is the new oil, isn't it? But
Right.
coming back to the numbers that you put across, right? These are very alarming numbers. And even if you take that smallest data that you picked up of 23% air pollution, look at from the India's context. Global burden of disease would say in 2017, the early deaths related to PM 2.5 would be the second highest in the world for us. In fact, ozone-related deaths are the highest in the world for India. Now, Environmental Protection Agency, well, acronym as EPA, rules are very clear, and many here present today would agree that protection of the environment should come first at the outset of any infrastructure project, isn't it? Now, this means that each stakeholder, we feel, has a duty to inform all agencies, workers, individuals involved that these rules needs to be followed. It could be rules or snapshots, but it could be incorporated within an orientation process on a project, which we are happy to discuss offline, keeping the paucity of the time of the session. But however, keeping a solution-oriented approach, we strongly feel that these snapshots, which are quite integrated, are adapted in a project into our daily activities on sites, on meetings, or training processes, um, which will kind of bring us to our next problem. How do we implement all of these? And that's where we come from, and we understand that the entire landscape of an infrastructure industry is shifting and experience a rapid change or rapid pace of change never seen before. We have a profound transformation through digitalization, as also Bharat mentioned before. But there's no alternative to digitization, even on project sites. Corporate leaders in India infrastructure industry need to set the part. Understanding would be the changing the role of digital technologies. They're no longer mere tools that we can discuss on sessions, but these are actually that will help companies not to do just a bit better, but fundamentally change the way the business is done. At Freshco's, we've primarily identified four keys to unleash this potential. And so we divide that as digital data, digital access, automation, or connectivity. Each of these keys can be linked to value chain for logistics, for procurement, for site productivity, but most importantly, what we are discussing today, environment, health, and safety. Bottom line, an industry which is capped globally at $11+ billion today is bleeding up to 30% annually due to mismanagement and inefficiency. So ignoring digitalization on construction project is going to be a blunder.
Yep. So, then a follow-up question would be that uh, 2019 is the year of construction technology. So, can you give us some pointers with regards to what can be some major milestone in this particular journey, on particular this roadmap of uh, the Prime Minister?
Oh, absolutely. See, the path to a more sustainable world is multifaceted, right? And it requires action on all fronts. It's each one to us to shape a world that's sustainable, digital, inclusive, all the magic words that we use. But as Honorable Prime Minister announced the initiative in 2019, in fact, further, the Ministry of Environment in India also looked to make good on the promise of COP26 with an aim to protect and improve the quality of environmental and abate environmental pollution. And then I say it with all confidence, all the Indian government policies are based on the best practices and economic viability today. Globally, digitalization and sustainability are the two key words that you will find are the powerful market influences in today's corporate landscape. Each has seen a massive amount of research about how it is going to change management practice, and then let's say more broadly, business and society. And so we believe the problems can be complex, but solutions are very simple. And allow
Sure.
me to share an example. Like for example, with trace cost solutions in a company process, it can be an essential step to just reduce our carbon footprint by becoming more sustainable. Still, leading companies are using paper for completing tasks that can be done digitally. Field service is no exception, right? And a simple
Right.
handheld application is all it takes to remove it. So, and there are various examples. A quick maybe example could be your equipment efficiency, right? Your field service softwares can indicate when an equipment needs maintenance, your lifespan of these equipments are better, operating costs are lower, it saves you materials. In turn, it removes or lowers your harmful impact on nature. So we can go on, but today we take pride that we're working on public sector and private sector projects in India. We would have active 200 large scale projects that are delivering faster at 20% lesser cost. So to summarize what you had asked, we would also further urge Indian industry leaders or corporate leaders to stay ambitious, right? And then to serve the infrastructure construction and strike that power to digitally transition, which will give us a more secure, inclusive, and a sustainable future for us.
Sure, Prab. One thing you mentioned, and I think we have a couple of minutes left in your time, so I can have another question. So, very important thing which you mentioned is that all stakeholders have to contribute, in this particular thing. It's not like only the construction industry or the consultants or the private sector are the only ones. So, if you can probably give me, two, 3 points for major stakeholders, how they would they would have to contribute to this particular paradigm. For
Oh,
instance, what should government contribute? What should civic society contribute? What can private sector contribute? Just raking your brains for that.
Oh, absolutely. And see, Ankur, from our perspective, if you look at the EU, right, the government made it mandatory for a certain scale of project to use certain digital tools to get their cash flows in place. And then what you saw about a decade before, suddenly all infrastructure projects started using scheduling softwares from Microsoft or Primavera, and then there's certain other well-known solutions. Something similar, while we have regulatory bodies, but these are not implemented well. I mentioned Indian government policies have the best practices in techno-economical viability, but then end of the day, it also comes to the corporate leaders to implement that well. ESG should not be a terminology used for pitches, but actually something that is also practically being used. And allow me to be very candid. We have a very esteemed panel. We do understand that many of the leading organizations in true form do not practice that yet. And so therefore, from that perspective, while it should not be used as a trophy, it comes from design consultants, from contractors, from project owners, even in the private sector, to really implement these regulatory policies which are promoted by the government. And so it's a shared responsibility. It cannot just lie with the government. The government has already taken a lot of initiatives. It's now on to each one of us to ensure that it's implemented well.
Sure. So I'll move to Mr. Satish Kamath from PCT Operations. So, Mr. Kamath, I think you have extreme amount of experience in developing greenfield smart cities. So, can you tell us some examples with regards to how you were able to bring sustainable, innovative practices while you were developing these cities? How did you use those digital technologies which are available? So, if you can share some examples with us, Mr. Kamath.
Thanks, Ankur. And thanks, Bharat and Prab, to really create a very solid direction to the whole discussion. There's no doubt that infra is big, and infra is going to be big in India. When I heard the numbers that Gati Shakti initiative is talking about, they're talking about something like $1.3 trillion to be invested in the next by 2025. That itself is going to create, if you generally see the RBI multiplier of 3, a $3 trillion additional GDP to a country like India. So we are sort of, infrastructure has the ability to, or the potential to actually double the economy or double the GDP of India in the next 5 years. That apart, I will talk more about the two of the aspects of infrastructure. One is, Bharat already talked about industrial hubs and, how Gati Shakti is sort of tying in all the infrastructure, that is roads, ports, power, telecom, this, that, along with creating economic corridors and manufacturing hubs and all these kind of things. So we are one such hub in South India. And we are also an integrated city. So I'll talk about smart city aspects a little also. So these two aspects I will focus on, but of course, the larger issue is that with the investment in infra going on, I think everybody, including every person in the country, is going to benefit. So we will surely see the GDP of India going to about $7-8 trillion by 2025-26. So if not more. Now, when we started getting into large-scale infrastructure development in private sector, we studied the environment and came to a conclusion that if you want sustainable economic growth, you have to start with manufacturing. Why? Because most of the people who will shift to manufacturing are the ones who are working in agriculture right now. If they have to go and sit in Chennai or Bangalore or Bombay or NCR, it will not be sustainable. So having greenfield cities closer to where they live will work, and it has worked beautifully. We have brought in 30 crores of investment, 30,000 crores of investment, 50,000 new jobs. People, 50,000 people are working here. So that's the sort of justification for investing in infra and and the impact on GDP and economic growth. Coming to the environmental, because it is always underlined at every forum that environment is getting damaged by urbanization, environment is getting damaged by factories and development and this and that. It is not 100% correct as well as not 100% incorrect. How you develop and how you implement your project makes a lot of difference. So in our case, we were right from the beginning very sort of focused on sustenance. So we went in for IGBC rating of the whole city. We are a gold rated city. We were adjudged as the best water management, best rainwater harvesting project in India by CII. So if you pay attention to the design and your process of building and your operation, you can be sustainable and you can take away most of the so-called negative aspects in carrying out any development project. Or I'll just give you one example of water. Most industrial developments will depend on groundwater. You go to Bangalore or you go to Chennai or you go to any place, they have zero groundwater left. The groundwater is 400, 500 feet below ground now. Right from the day one, we said zero groundwater to be used. 100% surface water, 100% water will be metered and will be given by pipes, and 100% of the sewage will be treated. So that makes it an island of sustainability, which is not affecting the nearby area or the population in a negative way. Power also, right from the beginning, we invested about 6 megawatts of solar power to make sure that at least our internal use, net is sort of using renewable power, or we are feeding in renewable power into the grid, so that at least we are sure that what we are consuming, what we are drawing is we are making good. So these are some of the ways in which large infrastructure projects like cities or industrial hubs could be made sustainable. Coming to innovation, innovation is another blame that we all get, that we are not as innovative as the tech industry, and we are not as innovative as some other sort of more new age industries. Yes, infrastructure has been working like 19th century organizations till now, but a lot of changes have happened. So just to give you an example, in city planning and how you put together a city, you can make sure that people have to travel less than 20-25 minutes to their workplace. If that happens, some of the big investments that are happening in the large cities like metros, and people have to cram into metro trains and travel half an hour, 45 minutes in those metro trains, may not be required if the cities are in the right place and they're planned properly. Same case with how do you use the another let's say innovative thing that we do is that whenever any water is the sewage is treated, that is put back into the grid. There is a separate pipeline that is coming to the users, and each industry is using the treated sewage for irrigation, for landscaping, or for cooling. Houses are getting, all houses are dual plumbing. So my flushing could be with sewage water, so that my net new water usage and let pressure on the environment is much less. So such kind of things are possible, and we are doing it. Another thing that I wanted to quickly talk about was digital technology. So in the first iteration of digital, we did all the PLC, SCADA, 2D CAD, and such kind of things using MS project management softwares and such kind of things. But now I think even at national level, the kind of things that we are hearing from PM Gati Shakti project, it is, unless you coordinate at a cross partner level, the large infrastructure projects cannot really be run efficiently. So there will be time overruns, there will be cost overruns, which the country cannot afford to have too much. And I think Prab and his company's efforts are sort of towards how companies can save those resources which don't come back so easily. And if you see in infrastructure projects, it is more of not an exception, but a rule that all infrastructure projects will be getting late and will cost more than the initial budget. Uh, so we have started using extensively IoT, and we have someone from Tata Telecom. We invited Tata Telecom to do full city IoT network so that each of the industry can use full use of sensors control. We are using automatic meter reading, mobile enabled applications. We are using extensively drones, geospatial applications, LiDAR. We are thinking of using AR, VR technology for further planning of the city. And the biggest thing that I had been very excited about, and I think I see that thing happening in other organizations also, large EPC contractors and all, is that there is a uh, sort of suite of applications called BIM, B-I-M, Building Information Management. The name is deceptive, but people are already talking about 4D and 5D BIM, which is sort of integrated way in which you can start from design and go all the way across the life cycle of the project and do scheduling as well as cost management and everything and hand over to the user. It's a fantastic possibility if it, and even on the back of the paper, we can see that, it can save something like 10% of the project cost. If it does that in $1.3 trillion that, that Gati Shakti is doing, it's a huge, huge saving for the nation. So, I hope that the whole ecosystem of infrastructure builders and developers start using such kind of platforms and benefit from it. So I think I have taken much more time than what I was supposed to take. But
No problem, Mr. Kamath.
it's a large subject, and covering that becomes a problem.
No problem, Mr. Kamath. I will actually give you one more minute to answer a follow-up question, which is top three challenges which you face with regards to, improving the sustainability or
Yeah.
enhancing the digitization of your operations. So what are the top three challenges which you face or which you've been facing so far? Very quickly, please.
I'll talk about the challenges that are being faced by private sector operators like us. But I
Yeah.
think I see the challenges in government organizations and large public sector organizations which are into infrastructure field. So I'll start with that. They have a lot of bandwidth issues in having enough number of people who understand this new age way of rolling out infrastructure. They are always dependent on consultants or third party software vendors and all those things. But that internalization of technology becomes a big problem. That is one. The other thing is that for private sector people like us, um, we are always struggling with, all this digitization takes a lot of investment. And this doesn't come out from one project or two project or something like that. So a EPC contractor or some infrastructure player, if you want them to be in the same common data environment that the large, say, NHAI project or some power sector project is expecting, it becomes very difficult for them to catch up because the ability to invest of a private sector is much less than the ability that NHAI and large organizations have. So I will, using this platform, certainly suggest to the government that, like you have the PLI for various manufacturing sectors, incentivize in some way or the other the digitization of the infrastructure players by giving them some incentives on the capex that they incur on the digital front, and that will be a great service to the nation, because I can see 1 rupee spent in digitization is going to save you 10 rupees in the form of cost and time saving in the projects.
Sure, Mr. Kamath, that was very helpful. So I'll come to Alok now, and Alok, uh, almost everyone is looking at you. Give us solutions for digitally transforming infrastructure solution sector, or give us practices which can lead to the sustainability quotient going up. So please give us suggestions. What should we do?
This is a very tricky question, and when you asked about the numbers associated with pollution to Prab, I'm sure you literally would have put him in the spot. But I wouldn't say technology is the cure for all evils that we've discussed so far. But there is really a role that I think technology can play in helping accelerate the need to be sustainable, yet be able to deliver on the goals set by the organization. I'll break this question into two parts. I'll first share what is it that as a company we've been doing. Now, to the outside world, we will look like a software company or a services company, but there's a lot of infrastructure we also built to be able to support our customers, like the ones on the call and those attending the seminar, on providing those services in an efficient manner and in a manner that allows us to maintain the SLA and the quality of service. I'll just go back a little bit into our own history on what is it that we did to be relevant in the sustainability and the ESG space. While we became carbon neutral way back in 2012, one of the measures that we institutionalized was that every business unit has to, be accountable for the carbon that they generate, and hence every business unit has to factor a carbon tax in in how they report out the investments that they need and the expenditure that they provided. Now, this forced many of our business units to think very differently, and we empowered each of those business units to say, okay, you can take decisions, or you can come back to the leadership on how do you want to use tools and assets that are available. So that's one part that we went about doing. And in 2020, we made a moonshot, which essentially defined that Microsoft will be carbon negative by 2030, water positive, and recharge more land that we use by 2030, and be zero waste by 2030. We also made a commitment that by 2050, all of the carbon that we've emitted since the birth of Microsoft in 1975, we will remove that, which is all our direct emissions. And obviously, you cannot do that by just planting trees or carbon sequestration in agriculture. There's got a lot that needs to happen using technology. So there are four areas that we did. The first one was, as Microsoft, when we built our data centers, there's a lot of work that we did around the efficiencies of what cloud data centers provide. So on the infrastructure standpoint, that's something that we built on. The second thing that we're doing is to what was just called out a moment ago by Mr. Kamath, which is, what signals do our buildings give? We need our buildings to talk to us. And so using AI or analytics or even digital twin as an example that was just called out, is there a way by which we can reduce the energy reduction or the water usage, and therefore, for example, find out what's the true cost of water? The third thing that we've done, we are actually at this moment rebuilding our campus in Redmond, which is over 500 acres. And we were challenged on what is the embodied carbon in concrete. And that is a big pain for every infrastructure developer. I think Mr. Kamath can relate to it very well, and that those are problem statements. But what we did was we enabled a set of tools that allowed us not just to measure the embodied carbon, but also look at what is the alternate set of resources that we can use. For example, a big part of our construction back in the headquarters is around cross-laminated timber. And that has similar strength, is easier to set up. And so we are looking at that as an example of reducing the amount of just the carbon footprint and getting our infrastructure ready. We encourage our employees to now work from anywhere. So if we are in Sri City, even if the 20 minutes drive can be avoided, we would absolutely do that. And the last thing that we've done is the reporting, which is obviously the reason why any organization will be able to take appropriate action. We are not just reporting for ourselves, but we've established a supplier code of conduct whereby we are in helping our suppliers and the value chain understand what they should do to be able to support our scope 3 emissions and help them report it better. That's an example of how we're pushing not just our own organizations, but who we work with, who we partner with on the journey. And that's really where the traceability comes in. Employees are far more aware. And to the point that was raised earlier, ESG are extra financial parameters. They're like the new bike khata now, because now the ERPs are designed to be able to support something like that. You actually can go to paper and pen to be able to build on it. And so if there wasn't technology or the intellect of the ecosystem, we will never get to our goal. So that's part one of what is Microsoft doing. And if I were to just expand on what do we need businesses to do, and I take a step back on what's the definition of sustainability. United Nations defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And it's a fairly powerful statement. And so every aspect of what we drive, if we can accelerate that using technology, I'm sure there is a win-win for everyone, not just on the panel, but across those who are attending. So there are four things that we do. One, like I said, is I encourage businesses of all sizes to think about the economies of scales we are building on shifting technology infrastructure to the cloud so that you can focus on your core work. And it's in an OpEx model, and that applies to just about everything you drive. Why would you want to look at capex if there is an OpEx scenario? But that also means that in some instances you may have to think about technology capex, and there are innovative ways by which many OEMs are building that. The second one on the infrastructure side is I'd encourage the audience to use the embodied carbon calculator. If you haven't used that, please do a search on it. It's a free tool that enables businesses to be able to call out the emissions in construction related work and prioritize the right materials. And there are many best practices around in the infrastructure state. There's a company called Madaster, and it aims to address the 1.3 billion tons of building waste that is getting generated every year, a number that's expected to double in a couple of years. And so what they've done is they've built an online register of raw materials in building environment. So it serves as a platform, it's a subscription that assigns a materials passport to every registered building, and materials that can then be recycled, resold, or reused. So we're not just building an infrastructure in isolation. You suddenly are connected to a network of organizations. The last thing that I would say is that the opportunity for us to get our act right is not possible without getting the right signals, and there is immense innovation in the technology world today, whether it is from understanding data, the artificial intelligence, deciphering GIS images, predicting issues. So those would be the ones that I would say, if I were to prioritize, the technology industry today can help businesses really achieve these goals, be responsible for the work that they drive towards sustainability, be able to deliver the results to their shareholders and to the environment.
Thanks, Alok. So just a follow-up question very quickly. Some suggestions which you've done yourself with regards to sustainability and innovation, which probably can be incorporated by the infrastructure sector. Some examples, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. The example that I gave around the embodied carbon calculator, that, like I said, that's a free tool. We are also building an ecosystem of startups that allows these organizations to leverage some of the technologies that we provide and be able to create innovative ways for driving the report out. So, for example, as Mr. Kamat called out, is there a way for us to really analyze what's the true cost of water? If we don't have water that is going to be extracted from bore wells, can we look at simple technologies that make this real? So we have startups that are working on that. We also encourage startups that are working on photovoltaic farm management. So using drones to be able to really understand, is there an area that we need to go fix so that we maximize the daylight time for generation of electricity? So those would be some of the areas that we've been working on directly, as well as through the ecosystem of partners and startups that we are nurturing.
Sure, Alok. So I'll move to Mukul, who's the final panelist. Sorry, Mukul, for coming so late to you. Uh, so my question is that you know Tata Communication is one of the organizations which is actually playing a leadership role in driving the sustainability agendas, uh, especially from the private sector. So, you know, if you can give us some suggestion with regards to your vast experience, just not from Tata Communication perspective, but also from the Tata Group itself, in terms of how we can drive innovation to meet the sustainability angle in a sector like infrastructure, which probably would be quite close to what you do in Tata Steel or what you do in many other, you know, your portfolio is so big that you'll have many similarities. So that Tata Housing is one of the entities in the infrastructure sector. So if you can give us some suggestions or based on your experiences that how we can drive innovation in India, especially in a sector like infrastructure.
Thank you so much, sir, and very good afternoon to all of you. I think at the outset, I would like to echo the importance of infrastructure sector towards development of the nation, which my fellow panelists have said. And certainly one of the indicators is the increase in budget allocation by 35%. And the multiplier effect, whether you take 2 or 3, supports this particular point in a strong. Let me first talk about the Tatacom approach. I think at Tatacom, our approach is not merely to use efficiency and innovation to enhance operational excellence, but to create I will say, a robust knowledge system through partnering with external technology drivers so that we can offer some of the advanced solutions and services while driving sustainability growth. Mr. Kama talked about one such thing, or the IoT, which they have deployed our IoT solution. In India, Tatacom participates in stakeholder so-called consultation with government bodies such as Department of Telecom, which is the governance arm of Government of India, and Telecom Regulatory Authority of India to support long-term policy of formulation in the telecom and IT sector. We are playing a pivotal role in the digital transformation of enterprises across sectors and smart utility services of the government flagship smart city programs also. I think I'll say to leverage innovation, we have partners with a wide range of international ecosystem players, such as venture capital firms like Andreessen Horowitz, Bloom Ventures, corporate innovation teams like Verizon Ventures, Intel Capital, and of course, Tata Group companies like Tata Steel. Disruptive startups like Versa Networks, NSI, with universities such as Harvard, UPenn, etc., and industry bodies like CII, NASCOM, Telecom Council, and others. I think let me also talk about one of the examples. I think being a digital ecosystem enabler, our innovation efforts are focused on developing product and services that serve the need of the future and impact the lives of the people. And I'll here give one example of the IoT, which is Internet of Things network in India. The Internet of Things network in India is on its way to being the world's largest network, spanning nearly 2,000 communities and touching over 400 million people. In addition to drive innovation at national and international level, we are offering low carbon products and services such as smart lighting, smart metering, safety trackers, some of them which was mentioned by Mr. Kamath of Cement, and cloud hosting solutions. I'll say these solutions have significantly enabled the abatement of carbon emissions at our customers' end, to which Alok also mentioned from the Microsoft. I think I like to stop here for this particular point.
Sure. One more question which comes in is that post-pandemic, would you like to highlight any specific activity which is actually now, first of all, put the sustainability agenda back on track, and second, has it accelerated? So, would you like to give us some examples of that? If your organization has undertaken some specific agendas around this particular thing.
Absolutely, sir, Mr. Ankur. I think this pandemic has brought us a lot of learnings, to be honest. Digitization, how to fast track this particular aspect has probably been one of the learning. I think I'll just mention one of the activity which has been a key contributor in the sustainability space, which is the fast tracking of the development of low carbon products and services. Why I say this is because through the development of low carbon products and services, we are enabling GHG emission reduction at the customer end. I briefly touched about this point earlier in my response. Let me expand a bit further. Like our product and services in form of IoT, which is Internet of Things, mobility and move, cloud and hosting services, etc. They are providing environmental benefits to our customers, which is basically in three forms. First, energy conservation. Second, avoidance of travel. Third, resource conservation. Let me share some data so that we all get a scale and the point of view of what I'm talking about. In last financial year, which is FY21, our GHG emissions were in the order of 104,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. And the GHG emission reduction potential at customer end from these low carbon products and services were in the order of 660,000 tons, 6 times higher. In absolute terms, we are able to save around 1.2 billion units of energy for our customers, which correlates to saving of $168 million. So if I want to sum up, state that probably Tata Communications, through its low carbon products and services, have helped the customers to save 6 times for every ton of CO2 equivalent generated from our own operations. So lastly, to sum up, this was one of the focus area which came as to be fast-tracked or accelerated as part of this post-pandemic exercise. Thank you, sir.
Sure, Mr. Kumar. So before we go into audience's question and before I summarize, I just have one generic question for all the panelists, and please feel free to, and let's make it more interactive. And I think if you can all have your perspective on this, that, everyone else has actually jumped on the digital transformation bandwagon since pandemic happened. And I think, frankly speaking, I've been working in IT sector for 23 years. These have been the most productive 2 years for my company, frankly speaking. It's a morbid kind of a statement to make, but unfortunately, that's the truth. We and the mask makers are the ones who really made some money. So the point here is that in spite of that, I think infrastructure sector is one sector which still has been, comparatively speaking, not that fast, not that, agile when it comes to undertaking digital transformation or adopting tools which can lead to digital transformation. So any specific reasons you foresee, or what's your opinion that one, why did it not happen at the pace of, let's say, other sectors? And second, what could be done to actually accelerate it further? So this particular question is open to all. Please feel free to contribute and, just go for it. Yeah.
So I may say something which is, we're not sure if this is the right platform to say this as well, but we felt that there was also an industry problem. Usually infrastructure projects or construction projects were very cash intensive, and not always all the cash flows were accounted. So it was also a cultural problem to bring in that transparency on board for all stakeholders. However, we feel that things changed in the last few years. And so therefore the understanding from the top brass that it is not a long-term strategy to be functioning in the way that they've ever been functioning. The processes are not changing.
Right. So cultural issues is, I think, one aspect you would list down as the basic nature of the industry is such that it would take some more time for it to get transformed. Any other perspectives, Bharat? Yeah, please, Bharat.
Thanks. So I think also the nature of the industry is such that it's a very long life cycle behind any infrastructure project. So this manifests in two ways. The first is any decision that you make cannot be a knee-jerk reaction to whatever is the flavor of the week. It needs to bear out by the time you hit the market. The second is always, I think there will be a little bit of a lag between what's happening in very rapidly transforming industries, which are, let's say, very tech oriented and where the scale isn't necessarily as large, vis-a-vis infrastructure where scale usually is large. And uh, for the reasons I stated, it's not always possible or viable to make frequent changes. Having said that, I think there's been an admirable uh, response and a strong response, at least in India, towards uh, using tech and digital transformation towards infra. Thanks.
Thank you, Bharat.
Ankur, if I may go next, I would
Yeah, please,
agree
Bharat.
with what Bharat and Prabhav said. Look, you've got commitments that are multi-year to your clients that have project plans that have certain dependencies, and you can't just pluck something out and then say, I'm going to do this new, which obviously changes the narrative around profitability, your commitments and SLAs, the readiness of the team to be able. So there will be those challenges. What what I'm pleased to see is how the infrastructure companies are using a bolt-on approach in many of the examples that I've personally witnessed, or even looking at technologies that are far ahead of the curve. Just the way Bharat called about blockchain for track and trace, those are immense value because there are insurance related commitments associated with it. There are contracts that are bound by it, and so the opportunity for the ability to be for a technology to be bolted on, and once the team believes that this is the right thing to do, then they form part of subsequent contracts. And I would say that is the right thing to do. It may appear to be slow, but we have to look at how the industry can accelerate the path. And they don't need to build everything that some of the other industries have done. They can quickly pick and choose the ones that really matter, whether it's digital twins on the Sri City example that are there. How do I know the challenges for recording, reporting, and reducing the emissions, and what can I do better? Or the traceability. It's not just in containers, but it's also in products like farm. How do you know where the produce is coming in from? So provenance then becomes a big example of why should you be thinking about it. And provenance also determines the carbon emissions associated with getting a good from where it's being farmed to the where it's being sold. So it's great to see this team, the sector actually taking some of these solutions, cherry picking the ones that are absolutely relevant for driving success. And I believe that there is an opportunity always to fine tune and innovate. And that's really where the conversations like the one that we're having today help open doors of what's possible. So really delightful to have all views being shared here.
Sure. Do we have any questions from the audiences? Have we received any questions, Team CII? Because I cannot see anything in the chat box, so I'm just checking.
Sure. So we'll just check on the questions part. In the meanwhile, I request other panelists if they have any question to take up.
If not, then I can probably summarize what, because I have taken extensive notes and there are so many things I would like to list down from each of the speakers as the final summary. So I'll start with Mr. Joshi. He spoke about how we can analyze data to create better plans. That's one thing which he has distinctly mentioned. He's also mentioned how blockchains, technologies such as blockchains can be utilized. And of course, the ESG charter has to be looked into. Mr. Prabpal was very categorical in saying that all stakeholders have to contribute to this particular thing, and there is no two ways about it. And he also mentioned that we need to identify the inefficiencies very clearly and succinctly, and then we can go on targeting them. Mr. Kamath very nicely mentioned that we need to have islands of sustainability created, which can be referred back to. of course, one approach is a big bang approach, but there's another approach creating those case studies or they're creating those islands, and I really like that approach. So he, of course, also talked about how we can incentivize digital transformation, how incentives can be built into the system for digital transformation of, infrastructure sector. Alok mentioned that, they're looking at just not transforming themselves, they're looking at transforming their partner ecosystem. Whosoever touches their ecosystem, they're looking at transforming them. They're also having tools which can be utilized by industries such as your embodied carbon calculator, which can be utilized by industry. And I imagine, Alok, they would be freeware or they would be available.
Very much.
Yeah, so those can be easily, utilized. Mr. Mukul Kumar mentioned that we need to partner with global leaders, global thinkers, academia, in order to build up those narratives and those stories which can be then taken care with regards to sustainability. He also is talking about, and I think this is something which Alok and me can take back, is we need those products which are having low carbon footprint, which can be utilized by infrastructure sector. I'm talking about digital products or IT products here. Of course, the hindrances for digital transformation, top three. Number one, there are cultural issues associated, and I think that was very clearly mentioned, and that is known to everyone. Second, as the life cycles are extremely long, the solutions have to be long-term solutions with longer horizon, but also short-term measurability have to be built in so that you don't lose track of the entire thing. And of course, we need to identify quick wins, which can give us some sense of achievement, which can egg us on, which can do something for our morale. So I've tried to summarize, and I think this has been a great session in order to understand where we are. And I'm very sure that just because the pie is so large and we stand to benefit so much as private sector players, that I think we'll be happy enough to actually build in sustainability and such innovation into our particular value proposition. So any final remarks from any of the panelists, or from any one of you who would like to say anything before we close?
So the only thing I would want to just share with everyone is, look, sustainability is not easy. This is not a topic that you could just say, okay, now I'm sustainable. It doesn't work that way. And so it's not just about bringing the tools. It's not just about, thinking through what should be the next project or how can it actually has to come in core to the culture of the organization. This is not that I will assign a chief sustainability officer and it's his or her job to be able to deliver. So I'd encourage everyone who's listening to this to really think through, where does sustainability fit in your larger scheme of things. And if it's not something that you can bring as a part of the culture, it is an area that I would request you to reconsider. It is that critical.
Thanks, Alok. I think that's a really, really pertinent point. So do we have any questions, Team CII, for the esteemed panelist here?
Unfortunately, no, sir. Please go ahead and conclude.
Perfect. So my sincere thanks to all the panelists, and I think we've had a great discussion. I think we've taken some notes. I'll share my notes with the Team CII so that we can, put this as a part of the session's summary, and we can, get it published. So it remains, and then probably we can come back to Prab and Alok and ask them what happened to all of these things. So
Sure.
thank you very much, everyone, and it was great talking to you.
Thank you. It was a great session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Bye.
Mr. Ankur, for moderating the session. My sincere thanks to all the dignitaries for your time and valuable insight. With this, we come to an end of the session, and we will start the third session of the day as Fire Chat on ICT infrastructure as a service of oil and gas sector at 2:30. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.